Today we're going to be talking about video game controllers. Science says 90% of gamers use them, and you don't want to see the other 10%.
Science says I'm a pussy.
So, for today's video, we're just going to be taking a look at some of the controllers I own, what I think about them, overall opinion, and I think it'll be fun. So, let's get into it. To start us off, we have the NES Controller, and I don't own it. You'll have to keep in mind I'm a high school student. Half the time I can't even afford my own dinner. You think I'm going to be able to afford a relic of the past? I have used an NES controller in the recent past, so I'm going to base it off that. I like the NES controller. The buttons are nice and clicky, I found the D-pad to be pretty good, but I don't like the corners of the controller. The corners of the controller kind of jab into my palms after about 40 to 50 minutes of gameplay, and it gets real hard to play it for long sessions. Nintendo did make rounder controllers with the new NES top loader to make it less uncomfortable during long play sessions, but they swapped the A and B buttons, so you'll lose either way. Nintendo did make some worthy upgrades to the SNES controller. The edges are round, and there are 4 face buttons instead of 2. This was also the first controller to introduce shoulder buttons. They did keep the A and B buttons swapped, but more games are designed around it, so it's not a big deal. The buttons are satisfying, the D-pad is nice, so overall I'd say this is a good controller. But I can't say good controller without bringing up the GameCube. Who doesn't love the GameCube controller? The design may look weird, but you actually get used to it pretty quickly. The face buttons have distinct shapes and colors, so it's easier to differentiate what button you need to push if you're not fully used to the controller yet. This controller also has pressure-sensitive triggers and built-in rumble. It doesn't seem like anything too important nowadays, but back in the early 2000s, this was pretty cool. This controller does have some issues though. The D-pad is really small. If you were using it to play a 2D platformer, it would really be a pain. It also didn't have the left shoulder button. We only have a right shoulder button here. But it's still a really nice controller. I'd use it for almost every game I play if I had the choice. Next we have the Wii Remote. I'm sure the Wii Remote needs no introduction. Seriously, anyone who knows how to breathe has probably heard of the Wii. The vanilla Wii Remote comes with motion controls built in and a gyro accessory. What I have here is the Wii Motion Plus, which has the gyro built in. The gyro accessory makes motion controls for games like Wii Sports Resort and The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword work better. There was another accessory for the Wii Remote to give it a thumbstick. The Wii Nunchuck was required for some games like Super Mario Galaxy or... Ew. Sadly, the nunchuck doesn't work as an actual nunchuck. I tried that and it didn't end very well. You can use the Wii Remote in many ways, like this, that, or even this. Yeah, there are plenty of compilation videos of people throwing their Wii Remotes at their TVs. Anyway, I like the design of the Wii Remote. Having the B button on the back of the remote makes a lot of sense, honestly. I'd like it more if 1 and 2 buttons were X and Y, but this works too. It's nice that the home button is a bit harder to reach. That way you won't accidentally press it when you're trying to pause your game. Overall, I like the Wii Remote. I think it does things well. I wouldn't use it for all the games I play, but it's nice. Moving on is the Wii U Gamepad. It kinda looks big and clunky, but it's surprisingly light. The ZL and ZR buttons are real satisfying to click on. Before we keep going, let me get this one complaint out of the way that I'm sure you all are used to hearing. The battery life really sucks. You have to charge this thing about every 3 to 4 hours. I can kind of understand it though. This thing is usually running 60 FPS. It makes sense that the battery life isn't the greatest. It has some really cool features though. Camera, microphone, speakers, it's really well built. It also has this TV button that I find really useful, honestly. The screen is also a touch screen. It works well with games like Super Mario Maker and Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Being able to scroll through text messages was really cool, honestly. I really do like the gamepad. I'd never pass up using it. Even if I had different controller options, I'd always use the gamepad. Speaking of other controller options, let's give a quick shout out to the Wii Pro Controller. This controller was more built for virtual console games or Super Smash Bros. I don't mind using this controller, but it's definitely not my preferred option. Why don't we switch it up and take a look at the Switch Joy-Cons? That was a really fucking bad joke. I know you guys are probably thinking about the Joy-Con drift, but let's just take a look at these and pretend it doesn't exist. Right out of the box, these things are packed with plenty of features. Motion controls, built-in gyro, HD rumble, NFC reader, these things have a lot going on. You can use the Joy-Cons in a lot of ways too. You can use them connected to the Joy-Con grip, connected to the screen, or on the side if you're a maniac. I like the Joy-Cons a lot. They can be used for many different things. But if you're not a fan of the Joy-Cons, Nintendo also made a Pro Controller. I use the Pro Controller more than the Joy-Cons only because the analog sticks and the D-pad are better. Nintendo knows how to make a good controller though. I really like this one. I still can't figure out what these grip buttons do though. Maybe it's part of a puzzle. Let me try something. Dad? As nice as all these Nintendo controllers are, let's move on to PlayStation. This is the DualShock 2. I would start off with the DualShock 1, but with the analog sticks, they're pretty much the same thing. I do have some issues with this controller though. The grips are a bit short and thin. I found my fingers getting a bit sore when I play for a long time. Also, the shoulder buttons are really high up. I feel like they had planned to have pressure sensitive triggers but then just gave up on it but left the design. I do appreciate how the analog sticks are on the bottom and the face buttons are on top. Other than that, I honestly don't like the PS2 controller that much. They had some good ideas, they just don't work for me personally. But things get much better with the PS4 controller. Starting us off, the grips are a bit rounder, which makes it easier to get a hold of. They also lowered the shoulder buttons, which makes them easier to use. Compared to the DualShock 2, I think this has some real improvements. It's much better to use. It also has some new features like this trackpad and a light bar. The light bar is a really good flashlight. Next up is the Xbox 360 controller. It may just be me, but I feel like the white Xbox 360 controllers scream I'm covered in Cheeto dust and sweat. They have a wireless version, but I have the wired one. I really like this controller. It's a perfect size and the buttons have a nice click to them. The only problems I have with this controller is the D-pad is a bit mushy and you have to use some force to press L2 and R2. But that could just be my controller. If you want a one-way stop to Satisfaction Avenue, let's take a look at the Xbox Series controller. This is pretty similar to the Xbox One controller. Personally, Xbox is my least favorite gaming console, but man, Microsoft can make a really nice controller. Anyone who's used the D-pad on this controller knows how satisfying it is. They even added some grooves on the edges of the analog stick so your fingers won't slip off. It may not seem important, but it actually comes in pretty handy sometimes. I hope Microsoft keeps up the good work with their controller designs. Speaking of controller designs, you might be wondering if I own any special edition controllers. The only special edition controllers I own is this Uncharted 4 controller. But calling it special is a bit of a stretch. Like, all you did was change the faceplate color. This shade of blue means a lot to me. The PS Vita also kinda counts as a controller because you can use it with the PS4. Same thing with the 3DS family, because you can use them for some Wii U games. I wouldn't use these though. I would recommend getting chlamydia before you use these as controllers. It may not seem like it, but gaming controllers are really important. It wouldn't be a fun time if you started to play Splatoon and this happened. But luckily for us, most companies have found their footing with video game controllers, so we don't have to worry about Jesus fucking Christ. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.